Happy Monday, Dog Nation. My name is Brandon Adams. Welcome into DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door. A couple housekeeping notes before we roll on. First of all, we're really busy today. It's John Stinchcomb later on. Very interesting video released by Georgia that featured a couple of frames that I think are especially interesting. For the video folks today, you'll get a chance to see that. We'll talk about it for our entire audience. I've got a lot on Zamir White off the top of the program. I think it's kind of a fun look at Zamir, and the fact that the source for this is such an unlikable figure around really all of college football, UGA included, I think makes it even more interesting. I will say that my hair is now completely out of control. I am getting it cut on Wednesday. This thing has just turned into a lion's mane here. A beard a little bit trimmed. We're on our way down to clean shaven here eventually, so we'll take care of that business off the top. John Stinchcomb later on. Really busy show. So glad to have you with us. I believe this is going to be a fun one. Glad to have you a part of it. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door, begins right now.
Brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
We are absolutely loaded on today's show. Later on, I'm going to look at the Georgia offense very close, and I'm going to say something about it that may surprise you, but I'm going to try to do my part to really explain exactly why that is true. We'll do that a bit later on. Really fun video has been released by Georgia. If you're podcast radio, you obviously can't see it, but I'm going to explain the couple of frames in that video because, yes, we have dug into it as if it were the Zapruder film. I'm going to explain the couple of frames that I thought were the most interesting. We'll do that here coming up in just a moment. Before any of that, though, let me begin with Urban Meyer. And I realize that is a recipe to invite folks to tune out because Georgia fans don't like Urban Meyer. But I believe, well, actually, you won't even like all of what Urban Meyer says here. But I do think by the time the conversation's done, you will really like this. This is going to be a really fun show today. It actually begins really fun with Urban Meyer here there as well, because let me see if I can set this up properly. So he works for like Fox Sports. They're trying to like build out their college football stuff, and they've been doing these same kind of like Zoom shows that everybody else has been doing. We do our own version of this with the Cover 4 and stuff like that. And I guess the topic comes up of, hey, who's about to really be a breakout star? Who's going to be a household name before the season's done? And Matt Leinart weighs in on his stuff, and Joel Klatt kind of weighs in on his stuff. You know, Klatt is kind of a little bit of a provocateur, a guy that's, maybe a little bit more plugged into what's happening west of the Mississippi. They're all kind of weighing in. And Urban Meyer weighs in too. Now, at the onset of this clip, you're going to hear Urban Meyer saying some stuff about Florida. Well, just disregard that for a moment, because what Urban Meyer says about a member of the Georgia roster, I find it to be pretty interesting. And the context around Meyer saying this makes it even more interesting. So without further ado, on a broadcast of talking about the big name, breakout, household names by the end of the season, listen to who Urban Meyer mentions off of the Georgia roster. Here is Meyer.
Recognizable or household names or correlate right with great teams, because there's a lot of great players out there on bad teams you never hear about because they're not on TV. They're just not in the conversation. So I went with Trayvon Grahams at Florida. I think Florida's going to have a heck of a year. If they stay healthy, I'm picking them to be a playoff team. I think and he actually played for me at Ohio State. Big, tall, legitimate 10-3 100-meter guy, and with a returning quarterback, returning coaching staff. The other guy is Zamir White, another guy that I saw up close and personal. I recruited him in high school. When he came out of high school, he was one of the best backs I've seen in the last 5, 6, 7 years. Powerful, fast, has it all. So I went SEC, a guy from Georgia and a guy from Florida.
All right, so disregard the fact that Meyer's picking Florida to go to the college football playoff for a moment. I feel like I understand exactly what that is. I feel like Meyer is in the legacy establishment phase of his career. This is a guy that had kind of an inglorious end to his time at Florida and then kind of had sort of an inauspicious end to his time at Ohio State there as well. At a certain point in time, you kind of want to be remembered fondly somewhere, so I think he's in the process of trying to rebuild his relationship with Gators fans. That's my assumption on this anyway. And so from that standpoint, just kind of disregard the fact that he's, touting Florida to make the college football playoff. But think about what he says there about Zamir White for a moment. Now, I'm going to say something similar to this that I said on one of our shows a couple of weeks ago. The context around Meyer saying that is just as interesting as what he says. Now, this is not huge, numbers. This is a streaming video on, Fox Sports, social media platform, so not millions of people are going to watch this. But Fox Sports as a college football broadcast partner doesn't even do SEC games. They're doing some Big Ten, a lot of Big 12, a lot of Pac-12. Most of the people that are hearing this probably have not heard of Zamir White because they're kind of outside the Southeast. If you care about Fox Sports coverage of college football, you typically care about leagues kind of outside the SEC. So when Meyer says, hey, who's going to be a household name by the end of the year, to say that to a group of people who don't really know a ton about Zamir White is, I think it's pretty interesting. The context around which Meyer says this, I think really mattered. Georgia fans obviously been talking about Zamir White for a long time, but it's also probably true that Georgia fans have been talking about White for such a long time, it's almost easy to forget about him with everything else that's going along with the storyline for this upcoming season. Really, George Pickens has been the most hyped member of the Georgia offense this offseason, and the biggest curiosity has been what's going to happen at quarterback, especially now that there's the potential of JT Daniels, assuming that he's eligible, being in the fray in the competition for the quarterback spot here this year. But have we forgotten about Zamir White? Have we forgotten about the potential that he brings to the table for Georgia? Let's ponder for a moment. Now, I don't like ever saying Urban Meyer's right about anything, but in the case of Zamir White, what if Urban Meyer is right about Zamir White? What if the big breakout season that Urban, who, as he says, knows him because he was one time a player that Urban was recruiting very heavily, what if that turns out to be true? Now, let me remind you here for a moment. There is some other evidence besides just Meyer saying this that probably needs to be reconsidered. Let's go back to, you remember a long time ago, back when we still had G-Days? You remember when that was still a thing? Go back to G-Day, I guess it would have been, about a year ago, when we had former Georgia linebacker Nate Patrick as our special guest co-host for that day. This was Zamir White getting ready to return from injury. This was all that kind of stuff. And I'd said to Nate Patrick on that show, Nate Trez, I guess you don't know a ton about Zamir White, but what do you expect to see from him? When I said that, Nate Patrick gave a very interesting answer. And in light of what Urban Meyer just said, what Nate Patrick said more than a year ago about White, I think it's incredibly relevant here. So when I said, I guess you don't know much about about Zamir White, here's what Nate Patrick said then.
But I have. So let me tell you, the spring right before he got injured. So he was practicing. I think he got injured in the end of his first spring, towards the end of his first spring. And when I tell you, he ripped us apart, literally so hard to tackle. No one could tackle him one-on-one, because he actually did a couple scrimmages. I think he did the first scrimmage, maybe the second scrimmage.
This would have been in August.
Of course, yeah. And we could not tackle him. We couldn't bring him down, and he ran really tough. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do to people in the opposite color jersey. So I can't wait, man. I'm glad his recovery is going well. Yeah. I hope that he'll be back soon.
The person speaking there matters because Nate Patrick is a tough dude. This is a guy that virtually no one gave a chance to make an NFL roster, went out there, fought, scratched, and clawed, and became a member of the Los Angeles Rams. This is a guy who's got a lot of pride in his own work, as you would expect from someone who's accomplished as much on a football field as Nate Patrick has. When he says my defense, the one that I was a part of, in those early August scrimmages and things like that, before the knee injury that White suffered that took him off the field in 2018, we couldn't tackle him. That's not the kind of thing that Nate Patrick just kind of tosses around willy-nilly, because obviously Nate that Georgia defense, they don't want to believe they can tackle anyone. But apparently Nate saw some stuff that he liked from Zamir back in August ahead of the 2018 season. And when you couple that with what Urban Meyer said, maybe there really is something going on with Zamir here worth paying attention to, because in the current media climate that we live in, it's possible to hide in plain sight. There's so much hype, there's so much talk, there's so much dissecting of every storyline that, certain things, once they stop being talked about, it's almost like out of sight, out of mind. It's very easy to forget about. Maybe Zamir White is an example of that for this upcoming season, because after all, it's kind of a weird narrative for the Georgia running game to begin this upcoming season anyway, because there has been so little talk about the Georgia running game. This rushing attack a year ago was so heavily dominated by what DeAndre Swift brought to the table. We didn't see a ton of Zamir last season. Didn't always see a ton of Brian Harrigan, who's obviously no longer here. Kenny McIntosh is still, for the moment, a bit of an unknown commodity. And because of that, there's probably less preseason chatter about the Georgia rushing attack than at any point in time, probably predating Todd Gurley's arrival here almost a decade ago now. This is kind of a weird scenario to get into. But the one thing that Kirby Smart's always been consistent on is that while we, media member, fan, everything else, while we didn't see a lot of these other running backs from Georgia, the James Cooks, the Kenny McIntoshes, and the guy we're talking about here, Zamir White, Kirby, the rest of the Georgia players saw those guys every single day. In fact, in a slightly different context, here is Smart making that point at the end of last year. Here's Kirby.
Very confident. I mean, Zamir's had some good games and gotten to play more and more. I mean, we're trying to find ways to use him. James the same way, and Kenny got to go in the game and did some good things the other day. So I feel very comfortable about the other guys. Obviously, Swift has a different skill set, probably as a total package, than all of them, and we want him to be in there. But we've got some depth at that position that we can use, guys.
So it seems weird to say this on the basis of how much we used to talk about Zamir White. But let's make sure we don't forget about Zamir White this upcoming season. Urban Meyer, who knows him as a recruit, expects him to break out. Natrez Patrick, who saw him as a player prior to his knee injury at the start of the 2018 season, says he was the real deal as advertised in those practices. Kirby Smart said last season, even though we weren't seeing him carry the ball a ton, that Smart felt comfortable and confident with him and the other Georgia running back. They could be called upon and get the job done if need be. Well, the need exists now. This is Zamir White's rushing attack. He will be the leader along with Kendall Milton and James Cook and Kenny McIntosh. And that breakout season a lot of us have been expecting from Zamir for really a number of years. 2020 is the time that finally happened. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella, window and door of Georgia. Good to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, radio at noon, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, podcast form, Spotify, Apple, Google. We post the show at the world-famous DawgNation.com. The point here is we try to make the show very easy for you to get to so you can be a part of what we're doing here today. And it would not be possible that our friends from Pella Window and Door of Georgia have been telling you about this, and it's so important. A lot of you are aware of this. If you're a homeowner, this matters. Energy-efficient windows and doors. Better windows, better doors, that's curb appeal. That can affect the resale value of your home. At a time in which air conditioning units are running nonstop because it's been very hot, those energy-efficient windows and doors keep that energy inside your house. It's not escaping out. It's showing. It's staying in there to keep you and your family cool, and that's what Pella Window and Door can provide for you. If you're watching on video, you see the great care that the technicians and the workers for Pella Window and Door use when they come to your home, making sure that it's an enjoyable experience for you, making sure that they don't just taking very, very good care of everything there, and a great deal for you here as well. Through July 16th, you can get 40% off qualifying installations or 0% financing for 36 months. That's a really good deal from our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Also at a time in which, contactless meetings and the magic of technology and video are important in order to have these consultations and talk about the installation options and everything else. Pella Window and Door of Georgia provides that for you as well. You can find them online at pellabranch.com. That's pellabranch.com, or give them a call, Dunwoody Showroom, 404-445-2979. That's 404-445-2979. It's Pella Window and Door of Georgia. They're viewed to be the best. We're going to get John Stinchcomb here in just a moment. Fun conversation coming up with him. Before that, kind of an interesting weekend over the last couple of days as the Georgia players, incoming freshmen, have been on their way. Georgia players also showing up and arriving. Those preseason voluntary workouts officially can begin today, but Georgia was good enough to release a video of a lot of players showing up, and it just sort of shows you the fun of college life. They're getting a lot of nice gear, really good video work, the drone shots and things like that to make this really cool. There's also going to be some attention paid to the fact that Georgia players are donning masks. The Georgia coaches and the other personnel showing up here, they're wearing their masks as well. So Georgia pretty clearly taking care to do some nice things on social media. But radio and podcast, what our video audience is about to see, I thought the most interesting frames of the video, there you go, a little rewind action. Look who that is walking with no knee brace whatsoever. How about Georgia wide receiver Dominic Blaylock? We've been asking during the offseason so much about what's the status of Dominic Blaylock on the way to recovery. The words we've gotten on this have all been really good and really positive. But as the old saying goes, a picture's worth 1,000 words. You just saw on video there, you saw Dominic Blaylock showing up, walking with no knee brace. I'm no doctor. I don't know really what that means in terms of how healthy he is, but it's certainly better than the alternative there. So really good look. And obviously, Georgia would never admit this, but there's a little bit of a wink and nod to that video because it's not a very long video. And the fact that so much of it was spent on Dominic Blaylock walking would seem to be that there's a little bit of a message to UGA fans there in that. And listen, around here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, we are glad to have been able to receive it. As far as the great care and work that Georgia's doing to keep everybody healthy, this is also something that Kirby Smart talked about last week. You see the masks in the video, and Smart's taking this kind of stuff seriously, as he has recently said.
But we're in on a little bit of a shortened version, less time in the office, and also alternating how many guys are in the office, offense, defense separated. So there's a lot of protocol there that's instituted by our university from a safety standpoint. And they've also got cleaning crews after and before we're in here that come in and protect that. So we have a shortened window, and then each side of the ball kind of has a window that they're available to come in. We've got a small number, and then we'll phase that as next week we'll be able to get a few more. And the following week, the players come back, we'll be able to get a few more. So that's the important thing, the safety of the coaches, because as you know, and this is a documented case, it's the vulnerable population and the older or the people with immunocompromised situations. And a lot of times that can be our coaching staff, support staff, different people that work in the program that we really have to be the most careful for because they're the most at risk.
So listen, I think the one thing you hear from Smart is, and we've been saying this for a while, Georgia's clearly taking this seriously. They want to get this right. They want to do right by the state in which they play their games and practice in. We completely understand all of that. The other thing I think you take from this too is that almost any problem can be solved if you have enough manpower to solve it. Georgia's got tremendous resources for its football program. So in terms of keeping the weight room clean and sanitized, you've just got enough bodies in there making sure that it's clean between workouts. Well, obviously you can do that. That's inconvenient or almost impossible if it's a small organization with less overall resources. But Georgia's got infinite resources, it would seem anyway. So keeping players healthy, keeping the people around the program healthy, that's obviously important, and Georgia's clearly doing the work, at least it seems, on the basis of the videos that we're seeing and the audio clips we're hearing from Kirby Smart, making sure that happens. It's DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll hear more from Kirby before we're done today. But for now, on everything going on with UGA, let's do a Marlowe's Tavern Insider Updater and talk to John Stinchcomb.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Always fun to be talking some Georgia football here on a Monday. Even more fun, a Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. Getting ready to welcome in our buddy John Stinchcomb. John and I also got a chance to be together here a little bit this past week, socially distant. We were 6 feet apart, and we had a great lunch with our friends there at Marlowe's Tavern. We were up there in Gwinnett at the Duluth location. I guess it's in the city of Duluth or in that Duluth area. What a good time that was, John. A delicious meal there that day. And I don't know if you were like me. I was really just kind of blown away. We were saying this about the Georgia football players before you joined us. You know, if you've got the resources to solve a problem, you can keep a place clean. You can kind of, if you're taking care, you can do right by people. And boy, I was really impressed to the degree to which Marlowe's Tavern was doing that the other day when we were there inside. The patio was obviously full with the tables that were available. People were having a good time there on that. People are out and about again. That's great for me to see. And I'm really thankful for a place like Marlowe's that's doing so much hard work to make sure that the restaurants are sanitized and healthy and everything else. I'm sure you were taken back by that as well.
Well, you can rest at ease knowing that you're getting a good meal and you feel safe. I greatly appreciated the measures that were taken to ensure as many safe protocols and practices were in place for us to enjoy what can only be described as a delicious meal. I mean, I've been missing eating in that restaurant. We picked up some home delivery, curbside pickup once before, but it's just different when you get to go in and enjoy the meal right there at the table.
Yeah, no doubt. It was really good. I've got a lot I want to ask you about. Let me squeeze in one thing kind of unplanned that I didn't mean to ask you about. We were showing the video before of the Georgia players showing up on campus. As a former player, now I realize this offseason has been completely different than any other we've experienced around UGA or in college football in general, but when you get a chance to kind of show back up on campus again, first day of school vibes, things like that, how exciting is that for you? You get, in this case, we see some Georgia players given the gear and they're getting those workouts going. Is there compared to the first day of school, is there that kind of fun, exciting vibe for you as a player when you're back? I mean, I'm sure there's kind of a grind coming for the summer, which maybe you have a little bit of, feelings about as well. But what's it like showing back up on campus again, getting ready to go, voluntary workouts and all the rest?
Well, obviously we've never had to return from a reason like COVID, but there's excitement anytime you're away from your group of peers and your teammates, and you've been outside of your routine. there's so much excitement about just getting back to that normalcy, the routine that you've grown so accustomed to, and you feel like you're one step closer to getting back to the football field, something that you've geared so many of your efforts towards, and you're just one step closer once you get back in that familiar environment around your buddies.
So when you were playing, John, were you getting as much gear as these guys are getting today? If you ever go to like Foley Field down there, the baseball stadium where the like the nice booster seats are, for the big dollar donors and stuff, they have a display of all the gear that the baseball players get, and football is obviously they just get every kind of Nike thing you can imagine. Were you guys getting showered with shoes and sweatsuits and shorts and everything else back then too? What was it like to be a Georgia player? How much gear were you guys getting back then?
Well, I'm going to sound like the all old heads, where we had to climb uphill both ways in the snow to school. But no, we didn't have near the swag. You look at all these. It starts in high school. They go to these camps and clinics and everything else that's available to them now, and they leave with bags and bags of stuff. So I'm sure it's all legal, right? I don't want to imply that there's any illegal gift giving, but especially for these college kids, they get decked out, man. I remember we had our one sweatsuit, and you could almost tell who was on the team because you wore the same shorts or sweatpants to class almost on a daily basis.
Yeah, that's
but
really...
No, BA, we did not get the amount of swag that the kids get these days.
Let me talk about Zamir White for a moment. I was addressing him before you joined the show. Urban Meyer had some nice things to say about him on a recent Fox Sports broadcast, and you go back and look at what people have said about Zamir over the course of the last couple of years, it's easy to forget. This was one of the most heralded recruits on a roster filled with former five-star guys. The Zamir profile when he first arrived at Georgia was as robust as anyone's. You almost forget about that because we didn't see a ton of him last year, and he's recovering from a couple of injuries. But, John, allow your imagination to run wild for a moment. What if the stuff that was said about Zamir, what if some of that really is true? How impactful could that be for the Georgia offense here this season, now that he will be, at least to start the season, you would assume the featured running back performer? What if some of that hype really is real about what was once said about Zamir White? We get a chance to all see that with our own eyes in an expanded role this upcoming season.
You're talking about the number one running back coming out of high school when he did. And if you think back to Nick Chubb when he had to recover from his knee injury, or a number of other players, they're able to come back that following season. But it's really 2 seasons after that injury where you start to see that full picture. And I think that's what I look forward to most for Zeus is he's been able to get out there. He played well when given the opportunity, but wasn't elite. And I think that extra season of recovery and confidence in that knee, now we get to really see what he's all about. And from his high school videos, the guy was dominant. And we saw flashes of that at times. He's hard to bring down. He runs very physically. He's got a good burst to him. And now let's team that up with the confidence that can come from a year and a half, 2 years removed from that injury. I'm excited about what he brings to the table.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but I've heard wide receivers before say that how a quarterback throws the ball matters. There's a certain kind of way you want a quarterback to throw the ball. As an offensive lineman, does the way a running back runs matters in terms of how you block for him? And when you see, Zamir, who I kind of think of as a little bit of a downhill runner, a guy that doesn't seem to shy away from contact, what's it like to block for a back like that?
Kind of fun because he makes you right so many different ways. There are guys that I think of James Cook. You give him a little crease, and he can take it to the house immediately. Like he's got that kind of explosion. But if it's not as clean of a hole, you'd much prefer a guy like Zeus who's more physical, who can run through those arms and partial bodies that extend out into the hole. So he can grind, and what looks like a 1 yard, 2 yard stuff in the hole, all all of a sudden he's dragged 7 bodies and it's a 10-yard gain just because of the physicality style that he brings to the table. So, I mean, you like all sorts. When I'm playing for the Saints, it was a different animal, whether you're blocking for Pierre Thomas, Reggie Bush, or Mike Bell. They're all talented in their own respect, but they bring something different to the table when you hand them the rock.
It's our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update. We're happy to have John Stinchcomb in the program here today, and as I said before, really glad to have been at Marlowe's Tavern this past weekend. I believe now, we've been saying this for a while, that you go to marlowstavern.com, you can find out which taverns are open, if the one in your neighborhood is open. I believe now all the taverns are now officially open for dine-in service. As John said, it's been fun to be back inside a restaurant again. I hadn't had French fries since the coronavirus lockdown happened this past Wednesday, or I think it was Wednesday. We're getting a chance to have some great lunch there at Marlowe's, enjoying some French fries again. It's a great dining experience when you go to Marlowe's. Chef-inspired food, great care. That the entire team at Marlowe's, whichever location you go to, whichever one is close to you and there in your neighborhood, the tavern's just making sure that the food is well prepared and really cared for. Obviously, craft cocktails is the time to be enjoying a lot of those on those patios. A great summer menu is on the way, and let me tell you what else is on the way. Coming up pretty soon, and I've almost gotten the green light to do this. We're going to do something really fun at Marlowe's this summer, unlike anything we've ever done at a Marlowe's before. So I'll be telling you more about that in the days to come here as part of the Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update with John Stinchcomb here on DawgNation Daily. Just for a moment, John, let me talk about something that got some attention on DawgNation.com over the weekend. Cole Kubelik, a buddy of ours here on DawgNation, the SEC network, put out his list of top offensive lines in the SEC to begin the season. Georgia was not number 1 on that list. They were number 4. Bama, Tennessee, Kentucky coming ahead of UGA. Let me do a couple of things with you on this for a moment. Whether it be Cole or anybody else, given the fact that Georgia did lose both its starting tackles a year ago, lost Solomon Kinley, is it fair to have questions about what to expect from this group this upcoming year with a new offensive line coach in Matt Luke and at least 3 new starters there along that group there as well? Is that fair to have those questions there at the moment?
Yes, I would feel disrespected if I were another team and Georgia gets ranked in front of my more experienced group, having lost 2 first-rounders and 3 draft picks overall out of 5 guys. And the 4th guy that transfers to Tennessee. So I would find it exceptionally disrespectful to the rest of the SEC offensive lines. Now, I understand and probably would agree with Cole if I weren't a total homer and much more familiar with what Georgia has in the stable, if you will, and ready to roll out there in the fall. And which 5 are we evaluating? I mean, it's all speculative at this point. We can't say who the starting tackles are. So to rank Georgia's offensive line in front of some of these more experienced groups, I think would be almost egregious. And it's this time of year where you can put together these lists and, when we talk about, let's make the analogy of when we discuss the quarterback situation, we know more about Jamie Newman because we've seen what he's been able to do on the collegiate football. So we err on the side of saying he's the lead candidate for that position. Well, I would do the same thing when you evaluate these offensive lines or any position group because there's a commodity that we've seen, and Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, they've got more experienced guys that are returning than Georgia does, and I think that's what you can evaluate rather than the speculation that comes with Georgia's offensive line, not knowing who's going to be where once they take the field.
Yeah, I totally agree. And in the case of Alabama, we obviously would assume they'd have a good offensive line. They also got a really big boost when Alex Leatherwood made the decision to come back for a senior year. Right. It's Tennessee that I find to be kind of interesting here for a moment because I think you'll agree with me on this, that when you're trying to build a program and you obviously can't recruit at the same level that the Georgias and the Alabamas do, you're not going to have the full balanced roster that those programs will have. But if you can stack a few good recruits in one position group, it gives you a chance to accelerate your rebuilding platform there. And I think in Tennessee's case, they already had Trey Smith, who's now healthy enough to play. They get Brandon Kennedy, a graduate transfer at one point in time from Alabama. Guys like Darnell White and Wanya Morris were recruits pretty much everybody wanted. We don't know yet about Cade Mays, but the Tennessee roster overall, I would say, still has a lot to be desired in terms of how it compares to a team like Georgia or a team like Alabama. The Vols also play every single year. But in terms of the offensive linemen, they've either been lucky enough to have on campus at the same time or that Pruitt's done some work to make sure they have. That's a position group that I will admit is, even as someone that doesn't like the Vols, that's a position group that does, to me, look like what a good team's offensive line is supposed to look like.
And I think that's what we've known historically from Tennessee. They probably waned from that for a few years, but they usually have very solid, if not above average offensive line play. And I think they've earned that recognition. They've got enough pieces there where offensive line, if that's what you're looking at, they've got some players. They've got some horses that you'd feel pretty confident getting behind, including a freshman from the state of Georgia at left tackle that walked right in the door and played at a pretty high level. So there are pieces in place that justify their recognition. And I think your assessment is pretty spot on in that that's one position group. There are some holes in that roster, but if you're looking at solely their offensive line, they've put together enough players to where I think they've earned that recognition.
John, good stuff. Thanks for being here as part of our Marlowe's Tavern Insider Updater. We appreciate that. We hope you have a great week, and we'll look forward to speaking to you back here again on our program very soon there as well.
Hey, BA, always fun. Let me steal 60 more seconds.
Please.
And it's kind of been on my heart, and obviously there's a lot going on in the world today. And, football, I love football, as do many of the listeners here. And this off season, the good teams, how do they spend it? They spend time looking at what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are. And as great players, I've been surrounded by a number of great players. They do a tremendous job of self-scouting. They look at areas that they can improve. And it starts with listening. I know at the end of the off season, I would go to our scouting department and ask for my report and see. And usually what you do is you point out your weaknesses, areas that you can improve. I think as a country, that's what we're doing right now. Is we've done a painful job of almost ignoring areas of weakness. And now it's being brought to life that, golly, we got to get better. We got to get better. We got to stop ignoring parts of our society that have gone overlooked. And similar to what we do in football, it's not an easy process. It's often painful, but it's very much needed. And I just want to encourage all of us to take a deep, hard look at what our roles are and what we can do to address a very serious and real issue. So that I love football for so many different reasons, but the fact that it can relate to and illustrate so much about life is definitely at the top of it for so many different ways. And I think this application is very much appropriate.
Yeah, John, I think that's well said, and I appreciate your words of wisdom, and appreciate the work that you do to make yourself a better man each and every day, and hopefully we'll all do that in our own way as well.
Absolutely, B. I appreciate the time. Thank you, sir.
Good stuff,
Go
John.
Dogs.
Thanks so much.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Always love having John Stinchcomb here as part of a Marlowe's Tavern Insider Update here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door. John's a thoughtful guy, man. I spend a lot of time with John, obviously here on the show, and also, just in preparation for shows. And as I said, we had a little bit of lunch there on Wednesday. This is a guy that's putting a lot of thought into, what it means to be best husband, dad, community member you can be. And I think that's what we all need to be doing right now. And the relationships we further is a very important part of that. Good stuff from John Stinchcomb all the way around there on that front. Let me slide over here into an SEC Through here for a moment, and let me talk some more here just for a bit about the Cole Kubelik thing. I like lists. I think it's fun. I know Mike Griffith wrote about this at DawgNation.com. as far as like what you say about the Georgia offensive line for a moment, I completely agree with John on this. It's totally fair to have questions about the offensive line right now. As John said, the most basic question of them all is who's going to be starting for this group? If you're looking for 5 offensive linemen, who is the 5 for Georgia? There's still some unknown there on that, to a degree. And we'll show you the list that Cole put up of his offensive linemen, where Georgia ranked, behind Kentucky, behind Tennessee, behind Alabama on that. And as I said to John a moment ago, I don't view Tennessee as much of a threat to Georgia right now. I don't think this team's ready to beat a Georgia. I don't think they're ready to beat an Alabama. Could they beat a Florida? Could they beat an Oklahoma? 2 teams that the Vols also play? Maybe so. One thing I do give some credit to, some respect to, is the fact that, as I said, there has been a little bit of a collection of offensive line talent there at that program. And, for people who saw Cole rank Kentucky out of Georgia, a little bit the same way. I'll be honest with you, I don't know much about the Kentucky offensive line, but here's what I can guess. That if you looked at their 5 projected starters, here's what you're going to see. You're going to see a couple handful at least who are former 4-star recruits from the Cincinnati area. That's like one of the things that Mark Stoops has done pretty well is recruit offensive linemen from that southern Ohio area, a place that geographically the state of Kentucky is very close to. Kentucky can't recruit well everywhere, but it has actually recruited offensive linemen typically pretty well because they've kind of used that southern Ohio area where offensive linemen come from as a place to do that. So kind of fun there from Cole. Lists, we'll make a big deal about most of those. Speaking of, by the way, lists, another one to make a big deal about is 4-star wide receiver from Athens, Deion Colsey, former Notre Dame commit, decommitted, has come out with his list of finalists, and it's a top 10. This is like one of those moments that comes around every so often where you feel like you're kind of going backwards with the recruitment. When he decommitted from Notre Dame, I thought we were talking about a small list of potential suitors for Colsey, but now we're talking about a top 10. Let's see if we can name all of these. You got Georgia, you got Florida, you got Tennessee, you got Virginia, Auburn, Oregon, Notre Dame still on there, Alabama, Ole Miss, and Penn State. So Colsey, good-looking receiver out of the Athens area. Georgia signed a ton of receivers a year ago. You almost wonder how big of a priority receiver is going to be for this year's class, but the assumption here is that Colsey might be a priority just because of how close he is to the Athens area. But as of now, Georgia is one of the 10 schools listed by Colsey as a finalist. Georgia does get placement on the graphic top left, so I guess you can do with that what you will. One of the things we always say about recruiting is that in a lot of cases numbers are more important than names. How many good players do you collect is more important than any specific player, because when it comes to a lot of these players, we don't know who's going to pan out, who's not. It's not an exact science, and in some cases you don't quite get access to the players you thought you were going to get access to, either because they get injured or because they have an academic thing pops up. An example of this is here from Florida, 24/7 Sports, other outlets reporting that Johnny Brown, a defensive line signee, Brown, I think, was a composite 3-star, but he's like a top 200 player in the country, so this is not a small recruit. He is going to enroll in a junior college here. So one of the big signings for the Gators for the class of 2020 is not going to make his way, according to reports, onto campus for this year. Florida has dealt with a little bit of this the last couple of years. If you go to some Florida message boards right now, they're really not too happy about this because they had all kinds of attrition off their 2019 class a year ago. Listen, no one's going to be perfect. You can't, always bring in every single player that you sign. But this is why Florida's inability to keep pace with what's happening in a place like Georgia in terms of the total number of elite prospects that Georgia signs, this is why that kind of matters, is because if you have any attrition off your roster at all or any attrition off your signing class at all, the ability to maintain the proper level of talent just becomes more difficult there in that regard. So bad news for Florida on the recruiting trail, as one of their bigger signees for the class of 2020 is apparently not enrolling at Florida, at least for right now, and will make that your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, I want to get back to the topic of UGA for a moment, and I want to reference something that I wrote about yesterday at DawgNation.com. I talked about the fact that the whole notion of Georgia offense changing has actually kind of been with us here now for a while. If you read a lot of the preseason magazines, I do love them. The Athlon Sports Magazine, I quoted this in my story yesterday, DawgNation.com, saying, hey, Todd Monken's here. It's ready to, you're ready to, turn the juice up on this Georgia offense, or whatever, analogy gets used. We're ready to see this Georgia offense firing on all cylinders. This is the year that's going to happen. But I had to admit in the piece yesterday that I also hold on to my old magazines. And if you go back and read, like, say, the Lindy's magazine from 2019, it's the same thing, just different names. James Coley's going to blow the lid off this Georgia offense. They're going to open up the passing game, and they're going to get rid of all these old-timey conservative play-calling things. It's almost like the same narrative year over year, but it's just different names who are going to provide the transformation. And what I admitted during the show yesterday is, hey, if you're a Georgia, or I should say in my column at DawgNation.com yesterday, what I admitted is if you're a Georgia fan who after a while they get skeptical of these offensive changes that have been promised over the last couple of seasons, the changes that could be the difference between winning a national championship and not, if you're a Georgia fan who's a little skeptical of some of that kind of stuff, you could be forgiven for wondering if it's ever going to happen, just given the fact that we've seen a very similar narrative in place now for multiple years there at Georgia. In fact, when Kirby Smart made an appearance on the Atlanta radio station 680 The Fan back in the early stages of the coronavirus lockdown, he was asked on the show, hey, how much will the offense change this season, and what will it look like with Todd Monken as offensive coordinator? And Smart at the time gave a very Kirby Smart-like answer. Here is what Kirby said then about the possibility of offensive changes for 2020.
I think the biggest thing when you're looking for the difference is going to be who the playmakers are. You know, last year DeAndre Swift was a feature presentation. Cager early in the season was that. You know, who are those guys going to be? Because every offense, as you well know, is built around who the guys are we got to get the ball to.
Right.
So it was Zamir. You know, we got tight ends that we think are going to be good players. James Cook. We'll have some really good players there to hopefully get the ball through. George is another one. We got some wideouts that we got to get involved in the offense to be successful as we want to be. So how different will it look? That's just going to be based on who those playmakers are. I just hope we get the opportunity to find that out.
When Tony Barnhart, Mr. College Football, was with us on Thursday, I told Tony, I said, listen, Tony, change is hard even when you want to change. And anyone who's ever tried to change anything about themselves can certainly say that. So even if Georgia wants to change the offense, or if the leader of the Georgia program, Kirby Smart, wants to change the offense, in some respects, it's still kind of hard to do because old habits die hard. Tendencies kind of return. And for Georgia, for Kirby Smart, especially during a weird coronavirus-affected offseason, the temptation to kind of fall back into the trap that doomed Georgia in 2019 under James Coley, could that still exist with Todd Monken? I think Monken's a better play caller, but the temptation to return to old ways might still be there. However, here's where an interesting wrinkle, I believe, shows up in this conversation. I wrote about this yesterday at DawgNation.com. I hope you read the story and maybe even share your thoughts with me on social media at DawgNation Daily on Twitter. What I said yesterday, though, is that if you're a Georgia fan who's looking for a reason to believe that this year will be different than years before, that Georgia really will upgrade its offense the way that it needs to, in a roundabout way, and this is a very surprising thing to hear someone like me say, but in a roundabout, the fact that Florida is expected to be good, I think might motivate Georgia to truly take the next step that it needs to take. Now, the honest truth is I think that Georgia could beat Florida being the same program it was, because it has the last 3 years. You know, Georgia was not very good offensively a year ago, but moved the ball fine against Florida there in Jacksonville. But ultimately, the fact that, listen, you know, every single person, including Urban Meyer off the beginning of the show, saying he thinks that, you know, Florida may make the college football playoff. Every single person that said that, every analyst that said that could provide a little bit of motivation for UGA to say, well, we need to make sure we're absolutely as good as we can be so we can prove all these, you know, Florida proponents wrong and just make sure we keep those lousy, stinking Gators at bay here in the SEC East. I've always believed this is true, that as a college football fan, you don't want your rival to be good, but when your rival is good, it typically pushes you to be better. I mean, Auburn's national championship in 2010, coming off the heels of Nick Saban being hired at Alabama, probably not a coincidence. The fact that Alabama, you know, after Auburn had won it in 2010 and then won the SEC again in 2013, the fact that Alabama upgraded its program by hiring Lane Kiffin, got better offensively, reinvented the program, that's probably not a coincidence either. Rivals have a way of kind of pushing each other. It's at the very beginning of when we first started the Gatorade Updater, part of the narrative around that was that you want to pick a rival for your program that is potentially good enough to push you. Georgia Tech will never be that for UGA, so treat Florida as your biggest rival, and over the course of time, it'll just simply motivate you to be better, and now maybe all that's coming to fruition. I think the analysts who are saying big things for Florida this year are wrong, but the fact that they're saying it in a roundabout way could be good for UGA. So maybe we will see this. I can't wait to see. And obviously the the coronavirus stuff and the time spent away from football, the complete and total absence of spring practice impacts a lot of that kind of stuff. But this is still a really talented roster filled with very good players, and I do believe that Monken is a really smart coach. And frankly, I think all the circumstantial evidence here suggests that Kirby Smart's ready to let him cut loose and be what he can be. Monken would have had other choices, other places that he could have worked, and Smart would have had other kinds of offensive coordinators that he could have hired if he wasn't really ready to see what a different kind of offense, maybe a more explosive offense, looks like for UGA this year. If that happens, it's bad news for more than just Florida, but it is not good news for the Gators. By the way, speaking of those lousy, stinking Gators, something else that's not good news for them, how about a Gator Hater Updater? 1,318 days. That's how long it's been since Florida has beaten Georgia. It's a great way to finish DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door today. Hope you have a great day. We'll see you back here again tomorrow. And on video. Time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down, air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. We trust R.S. Andrews to do all those things for us, and you can trust them there as well. This time of year, you may be thinking more about air conditioning, but listen, water heaters can go out at any point in time, right? That's not a seasonal thing. Heating systems, air conditioning systems, that's pretty seasonal. Water heaters, that's not seasonal. I can go out anytime, and you want a hot shower no matter when, and if your water heater goes out, you're not going to have one. Well, in many cases, R.S. Andrews can replace that for you the same day. And that's good news. Story after story, they've been delivering smiles. They can deliver a smile for you, but you've got to find them online at rsandrews.com. All right, over here on video. We start YouTube today, and we'll knock out a few comments. Really, we got a decent little window here. Let's try to do 10 good minutes and get off the air right before 11 a.m., and that could be really fun. All right. Let's see what else. CB and Bama Boy going back and forth with each other. Courtney Fisher says, I noticed the background color in the studio matches your polo color. Is that a coincidence? So I think what that is just the way in which it shows up on the screen. Courtney, I'm embarrassed to say we had probably a pretty big internal debate on this before the show began. We typically like to match the background color with the sponsor, and this is kind of like an amber yellow color to go along with what is kind of a gold look for Pella Window and Door. We typically go blue, but when we have a chance to kind of use a different color for this, we kind of do that. Blue is not a Georgia color necessarily. It just so happens that it matches a lot of our sponsors. And for whatever reason, because of all the lights we have to use in the studio, red behind me just does not look good. It looks pink. It kind of washes it out. The amber is a little bit washed out, but the red is super washed out. So we typically kind of go with whatever a match is for the sponsor. But thanks for noticing that, because we spent a long time talking about before the start of the show. I also don't typically wear white on air. Today, this is just sort of what was in front of me, so I grabbed it. Buddy Lee Z says, how confident are you with our pressure kicking game since we have going to have a new kicker? Buddy Lee, I'm not confident at all, and I'm not saying it's going to be a problem, but there's absolutely a chance that Georgia does not have a good kicker this year. There's absolutely a possibility. I'm not saying anything to disparage the guys in the competition, but until we see how that plays out, that's absolutely a possibility. Absolutely a possibility. So, I'm always of the belief that great teams don't necessarily have great kickers. Great teams find a way to use their kicker the least. And so, if your kicker makes a big kick to win a game, what that kind of leads me to know is you didn't have a big enough lead to begin with. So I think the job for Georgia is like the job of any team, whether they have a new kicker or not. Be good enough to make the kicking game less crucial to your wins and losses, because the fact of the matter is kicking's a little bit erratic even for the good team. So I think that's I think that's a very fair question, the kind of thing you'd be a little bit concerned about. Somebody said the Pella thing was green. See, I'm also totally colorblind. Is this green? A lot of the colors come different through the screen. It's very, very hard because of how much light we have to have to make it not look totally dark in here. The colors behind me end up looking a little bit weird. Jalen Jackson says, I think Monken's got full control over this offense given his contract and experience. Kirby will let him 100% run this offense. Boy, I hope that's right. That's good news. Bulldog also says that Kenny McIntosh is going to ball out this year. That'd be fun to see. Bama Boy says, look good to me. Good to have you with us here, Bama Boy, by the way, too. Kevin Blackman, good to have you back on here. Jay Shipe says it looked like Nickelodeon green. yeah, that's not what color it really is. I'm also totally colorblind, so a lot of times I get messed up on stuff like this, but it's not. Let me go over to Facebook for a moment and get a few comments over there. And we're still doing pretty good time-wise. Hope you all are getting ready for a great. We had a fun show today. You know, a good number of good topics. Busy. Excited about, you know, what Zamir White might bring to the table. Excited the fact that there's, you know, still some, you know, some energy around him. Over here on Facebook just for a moment. A little bit of a Facebook. Let me go back to YouTube for a moment. Sorry about the Facebook book. I'll see if I can get in a moment here. Tristan West says TIKS, trusting Kirby Smart. That's a pretty good idea for sure. Pretty good idea for sure. See if we can try this. Now we're in. All right. Craig Hill, Buck Ballou. Somebody mentioned Darnell Washington getting early playing time. It could happen. And by the way, I also got some tweets over the weekend because I talked about Darnell Washington wearing 0. Apparently 0 is not as new to football as I thought it was. People said that 00 was like an old school number, and like Otto Graham, I think they said Otto Graham. Was it Otto Graham? But somebody famous wore 00. I wasn't aware of it. I was not aware of that. But Matt Rukavina asking about Darnell Washington getting early playing time. I don't know. It's a very, very deep is the wrong word because in a lot of ways the tight end position at Georgia is unproven. But there are a lot of guys in that situation. I don't think you bring in a graduate transfer like Trey McKitty unless you expect to play him. And McKitty really, I mean, Florida State was not good. And McKitty had a ton of catches. So from that standpoint, that's an interesting thing to think about. And as I said before, you know, guys like John Fitzpatrick, Ryland Goody, these were very interesting players in high school. These were, you know, good athletic profiles. We've seen Fitzpatrick play some. Gody's still coming back from injury, but I've really touted for the opportunity for Goody and Fitzpatrick to get their chance here too. I think that Darnell Washington has a chance to eventually be a really sensational player. How well does he fit into the picture from the very beginning of his career at Georgia? That might be one of those I'm not quite so sure about. Bobby Jones says, will voluntary workouts go over plays? No. The one thing I guess is not clear to me, maybe it's clear to somebody, it's not clear to me, is if the players can go out and do the voluntary stuff on their own. Can they do that?
They can do it, but not with coaches watching.
Yeah, so you can kind of go out and do that on your own. But like the official kind of workout stuff, you know, that's what's sanctioned through the strength coach, for instance. That's just about conditioning. And by the way, I said this the other day too. For a lot of the high school coaches you may talk to, this conditioning work is really important. Even if we assume that most of the Georgia players showed up in pretty good shape, or some of them are in such good shape to begin with that if they're like only at 95% of that capacity, that's still really, really good physical condition. Even if we assume that to mostly be true for Georgia, you know, don't discount the work that needs to be done to kind of get guys at the right weight. You know, a couple guys dropping a couple of pounds, a couple guys adding a couple of pounds. Don't discount that importance of this work. So yeah. Let's see what else. Matt Rukavina says, I'm giving you anonymous status. I apologize. It was Jim Otto, not Otto Graham, that wore 00. Thank you very much. I was not aware of that. I'm also not 100% sure who Jim Otto is. But I guess it makes sense because his name was OTTO, so I guess he had the double O's. That makes sense. Randy Hall says, please elaborate more on the Marlowe's event. I can't yet, and I'm not trying to be purposefully vague. But it's going to be really fun. Basically, it's going to be kind of a way to do Marlowe's while also doing social distancing. So I think it's going to be, it's going to hopefully. We've got a thing that we're going to be announcing that I'm really proud of on Wednesday. Some work that we've done with a local organization. So let me get this out of the way, and then maybe by like say Thursday, let me shoot for that. Or let me try to do it this week because we've got something else going on this week that I'm really excited about announcing. So let me do that, and then we'll see about getting this out there in the open. See what else is going on. Chuck Pearson says Mullins' TikTok video, that guy tries too hard. Yeah, we kind of joked about that over the weekend. Nature is healing when Dan Mullins back out there, doing goofy stuff again. Now the actual dance is actually, I couldn't do it. I mean, it's better. That's certainly better than I could do. But yeah, that's pretty classic Dan Mullen on that. Gerald Harmon says, why can't we have a spring football game this summer? Well, by the time you get into the summer, once Georgia starts practicing, they'll essentially do a real version of G-Day probably like 3 times. Those Saturdays in August are typically reserved for those things. You don't get to see them, but that typically does go on there. So it's actually more, at least I've been told, more intense than G-Day because it's tackle to the ground, more like real football. Quarterbacks don't really get hit, but still, kind of more like real football. So it's like a more competitive version of G-Day that typically happens on those Saturdays there in August. Good to see Henry Carter checking in. Henry, thanks for being here. John Benton brings up a good point. Can't even imagine doing summer conditioning with a mask on. Yeah, listen, I don't really know the science on all this anyway, but if you're out there running outdoors, I don't know. Yeah, but it would not be easy. I'll just put it that way. Michael Webb says that Jim Otto is a Hall of Fame center for the Raiders in the early days of the Madden era. That's kind of cool. By the way, John Madden, better coach than people realize. Much better coach than people realize. Gary Westmiller says you should do a broadcast from the new football flag. Yeah, I'd love to do that. I'm sure UGA would be thrilled to have me show up with my cameras and start doing some of that kind of stuff. But typically speaking, they typically do a little bit of a tour thing like that. So we should be able to get to do something at some point in time. James Crump says Washington has to be ready. If he's not ready to do everything on the field, then he will not be involved in the game plan. I always wondered why Pickens got on the field more than Blaylock at first. Then I saw a block Pickens put on a player, and it says smart means that if you don't block, you don't get the rock. Yeah, Pickens was always an incredibly physical player. He also just had that sort of brute physicality he was kind of born with too. So from that standpoint, I guess my thing with Darnell is, and this is partially unfair because I didn't see as much of him as I saw over Rick Gilbert because, Gilbert was playing here at Marietta. But, in terms of, Gilbert was just playing on a better team, right? He had a college-level quarterback. He had, he was just playing on a big-time team, big-time situation. And my understanding is, because I followed his career, he was getting catches. Like, he was like, almost like the focal point of the offense. He was hauling in catches for an offense that knew how to throw the ball and, quarterback that, say what you will about, Tennessee, but Harrison Bailey's going to Tennessee. That's a guy that knows how to deliver the football at the high school level. From that standpoint, I think that Gilbert probably begins his high school career just maybe a little bit ahead because he's just kind of used to that. For all I know, Darnell Washington was doing the same thing, but he was doing it out in Las Vegas, and I didn't see as much of that. But my assumption is going to be in terms of polished route runner and things like that, even though Washington's got the requisite physicality, he's one of the most impressive looking athletes you'll see. Just not playing for a team like Marietta was Washington used as much, and therefore, does he show up with the kind of refined polish that a guy like a Rick Gilbert may have at a place like LSU? That's just my honest assessment of that. Gerald Harmon says DawgNation should do something in the College Football Hall of Fame. We've done a couple things there before, and obviously that's a thing that I'd love to do there again, Gerald. I think that's a good idea. We've done a couple of things there over the years. Sandy Puckett says, I went to high school with Buck. So, Sandy, are you a Valdosta Wildcat? That's kind of cool. Craig Hill says, Ken Burrow of the Oilers also wore 00. Old school Oilers uniforms, I'll put those up there with anything in the NFL. The powder blue, the white pants. I like the old school Chargers, uniforms as well, kind of predating me being alive. But I grew up with the Oilers back when Warren Moon was there. I'm not an Earl Campbell guy, but I'm a Warren Moon era player or a young child. I love those old school Oilers uniforms. Bring those back. Bring those back. I love them. Let's do a couple more. And we got to go. Christopher White mentions Johnny Roush. He says only quarterback to beat Florida 4 times. That's kind of cool. So, of all the players and figures associated with Georgia football, I think that Johnny Roush is the most underrated. Some of y'all are better at some of this kind of stuff than I am, but I believe that Roush, when he left Georgia, was the NCAA leader in passing. I believe that's true. That's been broken. That record's been broken literally a gazillion times since then. But Roush was a big-time quarterback at Georgia, became a coach with the Raiders, became the Raiders' head coach in a Super Bowl. They didn't win, but he was the head coach for a Raiders team with the Super Bowl. And the average person, I don't even think knows who Johnny Roush is, but he had an amazing, amazing football career. Amazing football. Bama Boy says, did Georgia and Auburn change the date when they play? Yeah, they play in October for the first time this year. All right. We got to go a couple more here. We got to go. Memphis Dog says, if every player and coach tested often, masks wouldn't be needed. Yeah, I think this is just a case of, Georgia doing kind of an all-of-the-above approach to making sure everybody stays as healthy and safe as they can. Kristen West talking about Clay Webb. Brady Pest Management says Auburn, Georgia 2019 was on this weekend. We need a fourth quarter program desperately on the subject of making sure you're good and ready to go to finish games. Interesting point there from our buddy Matt Breda. Phil Rogers says that Spurrier gave him a game ball after beating Georgia. That's a good story, Phil. I may have to find out more from you about that at some point in time. Petey Wheatstraw says, how about the Seahawks retro uniforms, royal blue jerseys with silver breeches? Yeah, that's kind of a cool uniform for sure. It is a cool uniform. Matt Rugavine also reminding us about Billy White Shoes Johnson dancing in that Houston Oiler blue. Yeah, I think of White Shoes as a Falcons player, but no doubt I've seen some of those highlights of him in Oilers colors there as well. All right, we got to get ready to go for today. By the way, check out our friends at the AJC, Atlanta News Now at ajc.com. Stay up to date on everything happening around the city of Atlanta and your world. A lot going on here. You can kind of follow in on all of that. Interesting reporting on how the Atlanta Falcons are responding to some of the things Roger Goodell has recently said. You can keep up with that at ajc.com. A lot of Atlanta News Now and some kind of cool let me see if I can say this word. Astronomical? Is that how you say it? Astronomical? I've got a neighbor who's like into astronomy, and he showed me a couple of things recently in the sky. Fascinating stuff. I'm an idiot. I don't know anything about anything. But I've seen Venus recently. I saw a space station fly across the sky the other day. So some of that astronomy stuff is kind of cool. So you can learn more about that at ajc.com as well. Get your Atlanta News Now and follow astronomical events by going to ajc.com. Y'all have a great day. Huge thanks to R.S. Andrews for making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible. Air, heating, plumbing, electric. $99. Get your air conditioning unit tuned back up to factory fresh specs. You can't beat that deal, especially when you don't want to be hot all summer long. So check out R.S. Andrews for more on that. Y'all have a great day. I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door. We'll talk to you then, everybody. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.